south of Scruffy.
When was that? When did you put the head down and start?
Um, Probably about 4 or 5 years ago.
Is that when you started making knives?
That's when I really focused in on it.
How did it start?
Man, it started when I was actually working in a place doing architectural metalwork. So I was doing like stair railings and sculptures.
Did you work for Preston?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep. So it started with him, and I was into the work we were doing, but I wasn't really into it. And I started just playing around, and I was just curious. I just wanted to figure out how to make a knife. And I had been doing metalwork for like 20 years before I ever tried making a knife. I had never considered like all the metallurgy, all the stuff that's going on inside the metal. I'd never considered the history behind it. I never thought about like the knife, the edge tool being man's oldest tool, And so I started just like hammering metal out and figuring out like, oh, this one gets hard, this one doesn't get hard. And then like, how do you turn it into an edge? And there's all this stuff that was like hidden inside the metal that I had never realized. So Preston was like, why don't you just go make knives? Because I wasn't really happy at the job there.
Really?
And I was like, you know what? I think I will.
Yeah. It's Preston Faribault. Ironwood? Is that what
Yeah,
it's called?
yeah. Aspire is his business. And then Ironwood is like the larger thing.
How long were you there?
I was with Preston for a few years, 2 years.
I've heard
3
he's
years.
a really good teacher.
He is, yeah. He's really good at kind of teaching through the relationship that you have with the metal, in that it's something that you can't really make a mistake at. That's not something you can fix. So, and he kind of uses that as like an allegory for life. Where, no matter how bad you fuck up, you can always go back and you can weld it, you can bend it, you can make things shorter, make things longer. Like whatever you got to do, you can do with metal.
There's some leeway there.
Yeah.
And there's nothing you can always Command Z. You can always undo it.
Exactly. I mean, it's not always easy.
Yeah.
But
it can be done.
It can be done.
That's a pretty good I don't know. Pretty good way to live your life, I feel like.
Yeah,
and a pretty good way to parallel it to metal.
Yeah, and kind of when I learned that from him, everything kind of started making sense. And it was like, all right, well, this is something that I need to figure out how to master, or at least like really figure it out.
Did you make any knives when you were there?
Yeah, that's when I started. So I was starting out just kind of making knives on the side. After I got off work, he would let me use the power hammer in the forge, and then they would have like the First Friday sales, and I would, I'd take old files and like hammer out old files and turn those into knives. And, it'd just be like a raw piece of metal with the file texture as the handle, just super raw. And, people were buying those for $20, and I was selling them. I was like, holy shit, I'm making money.
Yeah. Well, what about that thing that you said about like the edge tool being there from the beginning?
Yeah.
Like it's as important as the wheel, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Go out in the woods by yourself and try to survive, and you'll realize that an edge tool like a knife is going to be your best friend.
Yeah, I mean, you need it to make a fire. You need it to make a shelter.
Mm-hmm.
You need it to prepare food. You need it to defend yourself sometimes.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's always been there, and there's been more edge tools made than any other tool ever,
Yeah.
But yet there's still designs that can be made. There's still ideas that can be pushed. So, it still has this artistic merit just as well as this functional merit.
Yeah. So do you find yourself getting excited about finding new ways to explore this super old medium?
Yeah, absolutely. Like constantly. And that's why I've been able to put my head down and work on it. I mean, I've had all kinds of jobs. I've built cabinets. I did fine woodworking. I've done stone work. I've done concrete work. I've done renovations. Like, every job. I've worked in kitchens. Every job I've had it. And nothing's really been able to like hold my attention for that long. And then until I discovered knives. And then all of a sudden I was like, man, there's history, there's design, there's function. There's just all these different elements, and I can mix in all the different materials. I can work with different bones, different stones, like anything really.
So with metallurgy, like what metals are you working with?
It really depends. So I work with high carbon tool steels. Basically, that's the gist of it. But I work with stainless steels. I work with carbon steels. All different types.
Okay. And they all react differently. They all like each other differently. They all join together or don't.
Yeah, a lot of metals like will repel against each other. So like on this piece here, this metal and this metal hate each other. Oh, okay. They don't want to stick. So that's why there's that silver line in the middle.
Yeah, it's almost like a seam.
Yeah, so that silver line is pure nickel, which is basically like a neutral metal, which kind of acts as a glue between this outer layer of wrought iron and this inner layer of high carbon steel.
Okay, did you add that? Or did it create itself?
No, I added that.
Okay.
So everything is super intentional. Okay. Even no matter how random things look, there's still an intention into the process.
Yeah. So they're very useful tools. They're absolutely beautiful. There's obviously a point where you said like, these are going to be useful tools, but the part of them being beautiful works of art is what's going to, make people want to buy them.
Yeah.
When did it go from making a tool to making a kind of a work? I mean, they're works of art when I look at them. Right here.
Yeah. I mean, I studied fine art at school. I moved here first to go to UT.
Okay.
And I always knew that I wanted to be an artist, but I never knew what that meant. And I always knew that I really had a thing for the 3 dimensions. So I like things that you can hold in your hand, things that are tangible.
Yeah.
I was okay at drawing and painting and whatever, but, I really like the connection of working with my hands.
Gotcha.
And so, I don't know, just as soon as I started playing with it and making these things that, I had never seen before, even though, there was a whole world of knife making that I had no clue existed when I started making knives. And so, it was really before Instagram and before, there was all this stuff on the internet that you can find really easily now. I just knew that it was out there, but not really. So I don't know, just from the get-go, basically, I wanted to make a knife that had the same appeal as like a hand-thrown mug.
Ah.
So, I was looking around, looking for a good knife. I wanted to buy a nice chef's knife, and I started shopping around. It's like everything is just made in a factory. They all look the same. They're all super clean and like just very manufactured looking. And I was like, why isn't there the equivalent of like a hand-thrown mug, but in a knife?
Well, I'm sure that doing what you do at a production scale is probably pretty difficult.
Yeah.
Is that why it's not is that why you couldn't find that?
Exactly. Yeah. But, through refining my process now, I'm trying to get closer to that point where I can figure out how to create something at a semi-production scale.
Gotcha. And actually keep up with demand.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you're pretty sold out, aren't you?
Yeah. I mean, I'm like working on orders from 2019 still.
Really?
So,
and you're working as hard as you can, aren't you?
Yeah. I mean, 40, 60, 80, 100 hours a week.
Really?
Yeah. The past couple of weeks I've put in like 18-hour days, like day after day for like 10 days straight.
Is it getting old? Is
no.
it work yet?
Yeah, it's definitely work. But when I'm done with it, it's like I have such a disconnect from it that I'm like, holy shit, I made that? Like,
really?
It doesn't even seem real anymore. Yeah. Even though, I imagined it, and then I was there for every step of the process. When it's done with, I'm just like, whoa, that's pretty cool. It all came together just like I imagined.
Really? So are they your babies, like each one of them? Or is it just you're done and you're like, yeah, I blacked out for a second. I don't know how this happened.
Pretty much. Like, when I'm done, I'm kind of done.
Really?
And I really can't appreciate things until I have some time and separation from them. And then I can come back and be like, oh, yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. What happens when you're done with a knife? Is it like, all right, that's good. I'll put it over here and fulfill the order. Or you stare at it for a little bit, or
no, man. I pretty much put them in a box and ship them off.
Really?
Yeah. This is the most stuff I've had on hand in like 6 months to a year.
Well, you brought all kinds of stuff, man. That sword is obviously the centerpiece. That's absolutely crazy. That looks like a lot of the stuff that I've seen on your Instagram and on your website.
Yeah.
It's almost like it's a topographic feel. It looks
Yeah.
like a topo map.
Yeah.
And you were saying before we started that it's a few different kinds of metal kind of joining together to make that that pattern. Which it looks like you drew it in there with a toothpick when it was like
Yeah.
like it was molten steel, and you just kind of
It's
drew
pretty
it
much like that.
Is
Yeah.
that what it's like?
Yeah. So while the steel is hot, we create a topography using different dies on my hydraulic press. So I have
Okay.
this big machine that I built that basically has 84,000 pounds of pressure, and you can slide different dies into it. So depending on how you want to manipulate the steel, you pop a die in there, and it squishes it and creates that topography.
Gotcha. Explain what a die is.
So a die is just it's a tool, a patterning tool, essentially. So it just I have two dies that go into the mouth of this press. There's an upper die and a lower die, and then you put your work. You get the metal hot. I get it up to about 2,000 degrees, and then come down. You hit the pedal, and the hydraulic press comes down with 84,000 pounds of pressure, while that steel's at 2,000 degrees, and it just squishes it however the die tells it to.
So is the pattern in the die? Is it carved out in the die?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I use different.
So it's almost
methods.
like letterpress or something like that.
Yeah, a lot like it.
Okay.
Yeah. But I'm deforming those layers, so I have to start off with like this, a big chunk.
How much does that weigh?
This is probably like 20 pounds.
And it's steel?
Yep, that's steel. And,
How many kinds of steel?
this is just two different types.
Okay.
But I'll do 2 to 4 different types of steel depending on what type of pattern I want to get.
Okay. What are the best kinds of steel for making your knives?
High carbon steel is the main ingredient. So you need to have a steel that is going to harden. If there's not a lot of carbon in the steel, then it's not going to harden. So this one is made out of 1084 and 15N20. This one is Swedish super steel that started out as a powder, and it's like a DS93X or something like that. All these
Crazy numbers and
crazy
letters.
numbers and letters that don't mean anything to anybody, except for the metallurgists, basically. And the numbers are all code that, once you know what that code is, you can kind of be like, oh yeah, that's a high chromium, high nickel steel or whatever.
So what are the different properties? So high carbon is one of them.
High carbon's
So
one
that's
of them.
you said that's a hard one?
Yeah, so the carbon, that you have a certain amount of carbon that creates the hardness of the blade, basically.
Okay.
And then you have different abrasion resistance. So there's toughness of steel. Then there are certain things you can add to the steel to make it repel rust. And, so there's like stainless steels and carbon steels, which basically the difference there is just one has chrome or high nickel content.
Is that what stainless steel is high chrome content?
High chrome or a couple other things I can't think of.
Why do they call it stainless steel?
Because it doesn't rust.
Okay.
So that's the main thing. Or it's resistant to rusting.
Gotcha. Doesn't like oxidization.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. And so the stainless steel requires a whole different process of heat treatment. So that's what a lot of it comes down to also. Like,
What's heat treatment?
So heat treatment is how you get the hardness of the steel. So like a carbon steel, you get it up to its target temperature. You get up to where all the molecules are moving, and it's in a solution state called austenite. And then you dunk it in oil real quick.
Oil?
Yep.
Is that like quench it?
Yep.
Or-
Yep.
Okay.
It's a special quench oil, but sometimes you can use vegetable oil. It just depends on what type of metal. And basically, you're trying to cool down that solution of steel while it's in this certain molecular organization, where basically the carbon molecules are all in the corners, versus if you don't quench it, all those carbon molecules move to the faces. And so
the corners would be the blade or the edge?
the corners of the molecules. So it gets
Freaking me out right now.
It gets really, really deep.
Gotcha.
Stuff that you can't even see, but you can see it when you're working with it, and you can see it as it's cooling. You can watch the metal move through these different states. So like the Japanese bladesmiths, they would say that's like the spirit of the steel, because you can actually watch it move through these different solution states as it's cooling down. And it's like a ghost basically moving around inside of the metal. It's really cool.
It's nuts, man.
Yeah.
So what are some of these other ones you've got here? There's like a cleaver, and there's a few other. I mean, it's pretty much every blade you could ask for. There's a serrated one in there too.
This is a new one. I don't do many bread knives, but this is a bread knife, and this is made of the same steel as the sword there.
Okay. Do they end up having the same kind of patterns because the die is the same?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you'll use a die a couple of different times.
Yeah.
So do you put it in the die, get it to a certain shape, and then make the serrated parts of it after that?
Yeah.
Wow. And it doesn't once you start shaping it, it doesn't mess with the integrity of the pattern that's on there?
No, it actually, you kind of plan on these things ahead of time. So, the pattern is kind of developed, and then how, well, in theory, I like to think about how it's going to develop as, you grind the edge profile in. Because basically, a lot of them are just kind of forged out into these blocky shapes where it's like pretty knife-ish looking. But then I've got to go back on a grinding machine and like refine the shape and kind of cut everything in. And then you start grinding those bevels on, after it's been hardened, after the heat treatment.
How do you make a serrated blade like that?
So I have this machine called a KMG grinder, and I have two of them. And basically KMG just means knife making grinder. Okay. And they run on these 72-inch belts. And
6 feet?
Yep. So it's a 6-foot belt.
In circumference? Or in
circumference.
Surface area or whatever. Yeah.
Yep. And then I have different arms. So I build a lot of these different arms that go onto it. So depending on how you want to grind, how you want to contact the surface, you put these different arms on. So like the serrated knife here, I use a wheel that's a 7/8 inch diameter wheel.
Okay.
So it's basically like a skateboard bearing.
And you put them in one by one?
Yep. And I just mark it all out and just very carefully cut each one in.
And then sharpen the tips of those?
Yeah. So actually what I do is I sharpen the whole blade just like a regular blade. So it started off, just like this.
Okay.
And then I went back in and marked each one. You mark each space and then just very meticulously just grind each one out and then go back in and then sharpen in between each one.
Gotcha.
And so you've already developed this edge, so it's already sharp on the point. Now it's just a matter of making it sharp in between each point.
Amazing. So how did people start to notice your work? I mean, it's obvious, it's beautiful stuff, but how did it get into the mainstream?
Really, through the internet and
the TV show.
The TV show. So and also before that, chance encounter with Chef Sean Brock. Yeah. So Sean was this Nashville chef, and everybody was asking me if I knew him, and I was like, hell no, he's a famous chef. Yeah. And then I was doing a craft show, and he just happened to walk by, and I yelled his name from across the room, and he came over and looked at all my stuff and thought it was super cool. And we went out for coffee the next day and talked about life, and he was just super into what I was trying to do. And so he posted a thing up on his Instagram, and then like pretty much the next day, just my phone was blowing up. My email inbox was packed. I had like 3,000 new followers on Instagram. All of a sudden, like everybody wanted something.
Really?
And then I went on and did the Forged in Fire show.
Yeah, Forged in the Fire.
Mm-hmm. Forged in Fire.
In Fire, yeah. And you said History Channel? Or
Yep, on the History Channel.
But Sean Brock, I know his name because I've eaten at some of his restaurants in like Charleston, I think, and other places. It's kind of an interesting thing, the kind of famous chef thing that came around, the Emerald kind of era. Yeah. And people started like, going to these guys' restaurants, not because it was a good restaurant, but because they knew who the chef was. Yeah. And is he one of those guys who kind of got in on the tail end of that chef craze? Yeah,
totally. He's a very inspirational dude though. Like he's overcome a lot of stuff, overcome like addiction and some rare diseases.
Wow.
So he has I forgot what it is. He's got like a rare disease that almost killed him.
Wow.
And heavy drinking.
Yeah. A lot of gratitude in that guy.
Yeah, lots. And so, he really like turned his life around and became an inspiration to a lot of people who were working in the industry or just wanted to have roots. Like he was just a country boy from West Virginia. And he just like loved food and he loved what food meant. And so, the whole heritage behind it. So he started really getting into like bringing back these kind of lost foods, these heritage
heirloom
stuff.
kind of stuff.
Yeah, totally. So he brought back like this heirloom corn that was like pretty much out of production.
That's kind of crazy. All these seeds and all these things that have been, kind of disappeared from the mainstream for a while. That these like Geechee Boy in Charleston is one of them that like keeps those things alive, which is pretty fascinating.
Yeah. So Sean had a lot to do with that.
Really?
Yeah, and bringing Geechee Boy like to all of his restaurants.
Yeah.
That, and there's also a Carolina rice that he really helped. He started like working with these farmers and making sure that they could supply it, and guaranteeing that they would sell it if they grew it, and it just kind of built from there.
That's so cool.
But, yeah, I mean, it's a huge part of his history, but also regional history.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So he comes along and starts using your knives and buying your knives and using them in the kitchen at his restaurants and all that.
Yeah, that, and he put them in his cookbook. So he came out with this new cookbook, and it's just like you open it up and my knife is across the centerfold of the book.
It's beautiful. It makes perfect sense.
And he didn't tell me that was going to happen. I was at Whole Foods and I was like, oh look, Sean's new book. I open it up, like, holy shit, it's my knife.
Did you have a freak out moment?
A little bit, yeah. And I had to tell the cashier at the grocery store, like,
it's my knife.
That's me. And she's like, all right, cool.
Sure, yeah, exactly.
Cool story, bro.
Yeah. So that was a bit of a turning point, I guess.
Yeah.
Is when he started using your stuff. Did other chefs start to kind of get on, or other restaurants?
Yeah, for sure. There was a restaurant in Chattanooga that called me up, and they were like, yeah, we want like all of our steak knives be made by you.
Oh, okay, so these are on the table at the restaurant.
Yeah.
Okay, so did you see did you see people liking your knives from the aesthetic or from the functionality, or a bit of both?
It was both. It was a story, So like people were like, "Holy crap! Some guy in his garage made these."
Yeah.
Like, all right, isn't that amazing? Like people hadn't seen these things that look like a person made them.
Right.
And so it's just, most of the time people use these knives and it's just like whatever, it's just a knife. And I was making these things that people could have a human connection with. And so that's what they were really interested in. Yeah.
Do you try to tell stories with the blade or the handle or anything like that?
Yeah, for sure. I used to tell more stories with it in the materials I use. So I started out focusing more on working with reclaimed materials. So I would use old sawmill blades or old files or old farrier's rasps,
just grind them.
I would still forge them out.
Okay.
So I'd flatten them out and forge them out into knife-ish shapes.
Yeah.
And then grind them the rest of the way.
So what does forging take? What does forging mean?
Forging means heating the metal up to a state of plasticity, and then manipulating, using those characteristics of plasticity and manipulating the steel to push it where you want it to push.
Yeah.
Moving it where it needs to move.
But it's different than molting steel down.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So I'm not taking it all the way down to a liquid state. I'm bringing it to a point of diffusion. So I'm bringing it up to the point just before it starts to break down.
Yeah. And
then right at that point, then working it.
Yeah. When it's most vulnerable.
Yeah, exactly.
Just more life lessons.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, some of the stories that you would start to try to tell, would you do that with different, I'll call them steel recipes, or was it in the handle of what you would make?
Well, so like this knife is a perfect example of the
That's
outer
the one
layer
with the lead seam in it, or the what kind of seam?
Nickel
seam.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So this outer layer is made from wrought iron from the 1830s. Wow. So this outer layer is a process of metal that they stopped making in 1830. So it's really freaking old.
Where do you find it?
It finds me. At this point, I get calls from people, emails from people. Then they're just like, hey, we've got all this old metal. I went out to Maryville last week, and this lady was like, yeah, my dad was, a farmer in the Great Depression, and he saved everything, and he's gone now, but we've still got, like, all these buckets full of metal. Do you want to come over and see what we've got? So I drive out to Maryville and going through these people's basement, just, finding all kinds of old metal and seeing what I can work with. So
that kind was stopped. They stopped making it in 1830?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's when steel production changed from the Bessemer system to the next system of steel.
Well, steel was a huge commodity
Yeah.
in American history.
Yeah.
Right? Did it change a lot over time?
Yeah.
It
It
did?
did. Through, you had the 1830s, the way they made metal, and then you had the way that they made it from like 1830 until like 1910.
Okay.
And then, then we had the Great Depression hit. Then we had World War One. We had World War Two, where it, still became a ration. Then we had the post-war era, where, there was this recovery, but we started getting into recycling steel, where then they started, exploring the science more, figuring out how they can recycle it just to kind of get it back to usable state. And then, the 60s and 70s, where then they started focusing more on the space race and figuring out, like, what do we need to add to the metal to, create titanium or, all these other crazy types. And then there was a certain point where the Damascus steel, this process was actually lost for like thousands of years.
What's Damascus steel?
So the Damascus is this layered steel. So all this stuff with the crazy psychedelic patterns,
Yeah.
it's frequently called Damascus or forge welded steel.
Okay.
So it was developed in the Middle East like a couple thousand years ago, and then it was basically just lost. Like the blacksmiths were working in their caves with their back turned, and they never taught anybody anything because they were creating the weapons, and they were kind of like the gatekeepers, and so it was all kept super secret. And so that was like the ancient metallurgy. And only a few guys knew how to do this stuff, and they didn't really pass it down.
So they were creating this steel. Where's Damascus? Jordan, Georgia?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. So it comes from the city. This town,
Yeah,
this recipe that they're
Yep.
building and putting together and creating.
Yeah, they think it actually came from this one cave
Wow.
where there's like all the right ingredients, basically, that they were just digging this sand out, and the sand had all the right stuff that they needed to heat up and smash down into these bars of steel, and they were able to get these super sharp blades, basically, because of the carbides that existed in the iron and in the minerals that were there.
Hey Sam, I think that TV speaker's on. Is it on the remote control? Can you hear it coming from the TV? No, you can't. Okay, I was hearing it for some reason. Okay, sorry.
A little echo.
A little. I heard a little.
I heard
echo.
a little bit.
Did you?
Just
I wonder
like
where
the
it's from.
smallest amount.
I know, it's weird. So they're taking this stuff from this cave in Damascus, and it just happens to be the best. They happened upon the best of the best.
Pretty much for their time. You had it going on in other places. The Vikings also had their own thing going on, where they were making their metal, but then say you're a great warrior and you kill a polar bear, they would burn the polar bear into the steel and like imbue it with the spirit of the polar bear. But actually what they were doing was they were adding large amounts of carbon to the steel.
Yeah.
And so they had their whole thing going on. Then you had the Japanese, who had these like black sand beaches, and they were going and like digging up, buckets full of sand and then carrying it up a mountain and making their own steel. So, you had different cultures kind of figuring it out in their own ways.
Not communicating with each other.
No.
They were taking it from the land and figuring out how to make this thing that they kind of had an idea that they needed.
Yeah, exactly.
How do you make steel?
You get hot minerals. You get minerals. Ore, yeah. And basically you put it in a cup, crucible is what it's called, and you seal that crucible up with mud, and you get it really, really, really hot, and you cook it until everything burns out except for those essential minerals. And so then you're just left with this like hunk of ore, and that's your billet that you start with, and then you just start pounding it, and you just keep on beating it, and as you do that, you condense those minerals, you force all the air out, you force all the impurities out of it, and then eventually you're left with metal.
So how did people figure out how to start doing this on a production scale and make steel such a huge commodity to where it's in. I mean, you made a knife that's 6 inches long right here. That's absolutely beautiful and a work of art, but there is a billion times that much steel in a lot of buildings, around. So it became at some point this huge commodity.
Yeah.
That built, the greatest buildings in the world. It became a huge thing obviously in the, late 1800s, the early 1900s for trade. I mean, it's right there with oil.
Yeah.
As far as being a commodity that's important to human existence.
Yeah. I have no idea how, to be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a feat for sure, because there's so much process that goes into it, so many resources.
It's hard scrabble. It's a hard scrabble effort.
Yeah, totally.
Well, it's back to the. I want to ask again about the story of that knife right there, because
Back this one.
Yeah, because I cut you off when you were talking about it, because I asked you about the storytelling part of it.
Yeah.
Because there's also a handle involved in that's not steel.
Yeah. So the handle is this is a material called mokomegane, which is another metal that I make, which basically is layering precious metals. So this is nickel, silver, and copper that are all fused together. And that's a Japanese process that I was taught by the woman who brought it to the United States from Japan. And she's like 90 years old. And
what's it called again?
Mokomegane. And it's also on the sword right here.
Yeah.
So
on the hilt of the sword or above it?
It's called the habaki.
The habaki is the part that connects the hilt to the blade?
On the Japanese style swords, yeah.
Okay.
On this piece, it's called a bolster.
Okay.
So it just depends on.
So is that piece of steel? It goes into the handle and the bolster wraps around and keeps it in there tight.
Yeah.
So it's a very important piece.
Yeah. You don't have to have that piece, but it adds a lot of strength and style to it.
Yeah.
And then this part of the handle is black palm wood. So
where do you get that?
I got a guy. You gotta have a guy. No, I got this from Jeffrey's Woodworks out in Seymour.
Okay.
So they're my favorite wood shop. If you ever need any lumber,
there you go.
They're the ones to go to.
And then the bottom of it is.
In the bottom, this is a some sort of horn. I believe it's a Musk Ox Horn.
Wow. Did you get that from Jeffrey too?
So no, I think I got that from the big knife show in Atlanta.
Okay. And then how do you get is that a lathe that you get it all put together?
No, I hand shape it all.
Wow, man.
So I make all the pieces individually, and then through either just sanding and filing.
Yeah.
I just shape everything.
That's so amazing.
And then the wood I put through a special stabilization process also, where I basically I bake the wood and remove all the moisture from it, so it's totally dry. And then it goes into a vacuum chamber in this special resin, and it suck all the air out of it for weeks. And what that does, it forces this resin into the pores of the wood.
So you take the moisture out, and then you put the resin on it.
I submerge the wood into the resin.
And then it vacuums itself in.
And it vacuums, it sucks in all the pores.
To fill into the pores that
fills
were
in the pores,
full of moisture before.
Yeah. Okay. Or air.
Yeah.
And then, after it's been in there for a few weeks, all that resin sucked into it. Then it gets wrapped in aluminum foil and put in a kiln. And at 200 degrees, this resin catalyzes, and it expands in those pores.
Oh, man.
And so it essentially glues the wood together from the inside.
Gotcha.
So that moisture can't get into it, whatever. So none of these have any finish on them at all.
Really?
Yeah.
Even the shiny one right there that you were just holding up.
Yep.
Is that all from the resin?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
That's from the resin, and then sanding it up to 5,000 grit.
See, that's what's 5,000 grit sandpaper?
Yeah. Jeez. Yeah, you're sanding with notebook paper, basically.
Yeah. That you're blowing my mind telling me that there's no finish on that.
Yeah.
It looks like, it's as shiny as polyurethane, some of them. And then some of them, even the duller finishes like that are fascinating. And it does not look like raw wood. It looks like you sanded it with 5,000 grit sandpaper.
Yeah, so depending on how shiny I want to make it.
Yeah.
You can take it up as high as you want and then buff it. Just buffing wheels and sanding rouge.
Gotcha.
So with different waxes that have a small amount of grit in them, basically.
So how many different styles of blades or swords or I know you don't make a lot of swords, but how many different styles of knives do you make?
It's really unlimited.
Really?
I make I have like 4 to 6 like kind of production styles that I do a lot of, but then within that, it's pretty much unlimited.
Gotcha. Well, you say production, but they're still all handmade, right?
Yeah,
God,
yeah,
that's
yeah.
crazy.
But I have to kind of have some baselines that people understand.
Yeah.
So I have like a common chef's knife, and people are like, oh yeah, I like your chef's knife, and
Really?
there's things about it that they like. They they expect it to be a certain depth of the hill. They expect for the blade to be shaped in a certain way, etc. But otherwise, it's pretty much wide open.
Yeah. Have you had any collabs with chefs that have said, "Hey, I love this knife. I wish it was a little shorter right here," or anything like that?
I mean, not yes and no.
Okay.
I've had definitely some chefs that they show me like their favorite knife, and they're like, but I would love it if it were like a little more like this and a little less like that. And then I'll try to figure out what they mean.
Yeah.
And then I'll send them a knife, and then they might send it back to me and be like, I want a little more of this, a little less of that.
Yeah.
And so there is kind of a dance back and forth to like get them exactly what they want.
Yeah. Who do you make your knives for? Do you think in your head when you're making it? Anybody, or I mean, are you making it for the best chef in the world, or are you making it for somebody who wants something, a badass piece of art that's also functional in their kitchen? Like, what are you thinking about?
Yeah, I'm thinking about myself, to be honest. I
Really?
mean, I do think about people. I have certain archetypes sometimes that I'll think about. A really crazy one. I was building a knife and just for fun, and I was like, I want to build a knife that's like a video game knife. And I happened to be watching that show Silicon Valley
Yeah.
at the time, and I was like, what would Guilfoyle want? And fucking Guilfoyle calls me up and was like, hey man, I want that knife.
Really?
And he wanted the knife that I designed for him, but he didn't even know that.
No, that's not. There's no way. Wait.
Yeah.
Say that again. Okay. So you're watching Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
You get inspired by one of the characters in the show.
Yeah. Well, it didn't start out as being inspired. First, it was just like, I want to build a knife for a nerd with like too much money.
Yeah.
And then I was watching the show, and I was like, yeah, basically, what would this guy want?
And then so you finish the knife.
I finished the knife, and then
He bought it.
he sends me a message. He's like, how can I get that? And I was like, whoa.
That is trippy.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the last concert I went to was Sturgill Simpson.
Yeah. At the
Coliseum.
Coliseum. Yeah. That was my last one too.
Yeah, awesome show. And I was like, man, what would Sturgill want? Month later, he hits me up. He's like, bro, I want this. And so he's on my books for a whole set of knives.
Not done with him yet?
No.
Oh, and he hit you up right after the last show.
Yep.
Oh, it's nuts, man.
Yeah. And you know what? I was at that last show, and I was like, well, man, I definitely paid too much for tickets, but it was worth it,
You're getting your money back
And
now.
then now I'm getting my money back.
It was a good show, I thought.
Oh, it was awesome.
Yeah, I was at the one in Asheville right before that at the Civic Center, and then went to the one in Knoxville too.
Right
and
on.
everybody kind of cleared out after the Tyler Childers.
Yeah,
It
but I
felt
was
like-
cool with that.
I was too.
I had tickets in the pit. And,
Me too. I was
it
ready for
awesome.
some sound and fury.
Yeah,
Yeah,
totally.
it was good. When are you going to be done with Sturgill's knives?
Soon, I hope.
Yeah, because that was a year ago.
Yeah.
Right? Is that how far back you are?
I'm like 2 years behind.
And you got people working with you too, right?
Yeah, I've got
Helping
2
you?
assistants, so
Okay.
they're both awesome. They're both learning things, So it's been really great that it's not just all on my shoulders anymore.
Yeah. Is that how it started? Was just you?
Yeah.
And how long was it like that before you got some help and was like, oh, uncle?
About 5 years.
Really?
Yeah.
Had you started to hit the stride, or was it after the Sean Brock stuff that you were like, I need some help?
No, I mean, I just started hitting my stride, to be honest.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, I really started hitting my stride probably about a year ago.
Okay.
And like finally figuring out like, all right, I had all my machines finally like dialed in. It took a long time to accumulate the tools, because you can't
build the machines to make the knives.
Exactly, because you can't just go to Lowe's and like buy a massive hydraulic press or a power hammer
Right.
or even a forge. So it's taken me, many iterations and like just a lot of tweaking things to figure out how to get to that next step and how to create, how to get to that next level. How do I make what I can see?
Yeah. So is there something out there where that is I don't know, man. It feels like you've got it. It feels like you've reached the pinnacle of your craft. But is there something just beyond there that you're kind of reaching for, or like looking towards as
Yeah.
kind of a way to, take it to the next level?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm just getting started, really.
Really?
Yeah, like I've been just started reading this Robert Greene book on mastery, and he's an awesome author. He wrote this book called The 48 Laws of Power. That's like the #1 book in prison, and it's awesome. But in this book on mastery, basically, he breaks it down to where, just once you can reach that flow state, then you're like getting to the point where you've started to master things, and then that's when like the actual work kind of begins.
Gotcha.
And so now what I'm trying to figure out is like, how do I teach this stuff? So, to be able to figure it out on my own is one thing, but then how to explain it to somebody else in a way that they can do it efficiently and safely. That's what I'm trying to figure out now.
Flow state? What's
Yeah,
that?
where you can just work without, where you're moving and you're not even thinking about your actions.
Gotcha.
You're not thinking about why you're doing it. You're not thinking about how you're doing it. It's just coming to you.
It's like tying your shoes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Riding a bicycle, whatever.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm just now kind of getting to that point where I can hit that flow state, and I can be working on 5 things at once and like just bouncing around, and everything's just moving seamlessly.
So the teaching part of it, is that what you're imparting onto your 2 assistants now?
Yeah.
Trying to get them up to your level?
Yeah, or at least they have years before they'll
Get there?
get there, but by me teaching it, I understand it better. So it's I don't know, to be able to do it's one thing, but then to be able to explain how to do it is like a totally different game.
I get it.
Yeah, and I want to be able to teach these things. I mean, I get emails every single week of people wanting to come work for me.
Yeah.
And I'm like, sorry, dude, I'm like in my backyard garage here. Like, I don't really have room for another person, nor do I have the time to take out. But I think that the skills, going back to like what I learned from Preston, that, mistakes can be made and you can fix these things. I want to be able to pass on kind of the next level of all that to people.
So what does the next level look like for your craft, or how do you make this better? I don't know how you would make that better.
I
To
mean,
you, what does that mean?
To me, it's how do I make it, how do I remove decisions from the process?
Your own decisions?
Yeah. Well, so the decisions are made before anything even happens. So
you want to improv a little more.
Yeah, I want to be able to improv more and less at the same time. Yeah, like in the same way that like a musician can like jam on a song for half an hour and they've played the same song a million times, but they can still play it in new ways that they don't even realize yet.
Type 2 fish.
Yeah, exactly. But they've played it so many times that they can surprise themselves still. And but it's like still so planned out, but yet the more they plan it out, the more it opens up.
I feel ya.
And so that's kind of where I'm trying to get to. And I'm getting closer, but also like, do you ever get there? You don't know when you do get there, really.
So I think I know the answer to this, maybe, but do you ever start working on something and it's like, fuck this up, I'm throwing it away?
Oh, yeah.
Really?
Yeah, all the time. I'm not precious about anything. I mean, I try to figure out how to save it. If I've got 40 or 60 hours into something, like I'll do everything I can to maybe make it a smaller knife or, or incorporate it into another piece.
Is that how you save it? Make it a smaller knife?
Usually. I mean, there's a saying where knife makers don't make mistakes. They just make smaller knives. And there's definitely some truth to that.
Yeah. How long did this sword take?
That's probably got 200, 300 hours.
Gotcha.
I don't know.
So a couple months.
Yeah.
Of 9 to 5 every day.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
I mean, just making this piece has about 100 hours into it.
And that's the Japanese style.
Yeah.
And that's called the bolster?
That's the habaki.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, which in traditional Japanese sword making, every piece of this would be made by a different artist.
Really?
Yeah.
Did Sturgill buy some of your Japanese stuff? Is that where he got
Not yet.
enthralled?
Not yet. But
He seems prime for the taking.
oh, he is. We email back and forth, and he told me he's got more Japanese swords than a grown man should have. More katanas, specifically.
Well, what else? Like this big cleaver here, or that's what it looks
Yeah.
like to me. So how much time is into that? You know?
This one's probably got 60, 80 hours.
That's amazing, man.
Altogether,
I mean, you've got 6, 8 a year's worth of work laying here in front of me, and it's just it's amazing to see such a and it looks like a year's worth of work too. You know, it's a craft that that it feels like it shows the effort that you put into it with your craftsmanship married to it. It looks.
I hope so. I mean, that's always the goal for someone to look at it and be like, holy shit, how did somebody make this?
What about this sheath here? You made that too?
Yeah. So this, the sheath, or
Is that
the saya, is what it's also called.
Gotcha.
The stand and the handle are all made from the same piece of wood.
Oh.
So it's all Brazilian rosewood.
Okay.
And I made it so that the grain matches up on it.
No
So
way.
when you look at it, you can see the grain
Dude.
just all flows.
It's so stupidly awesome. It's amazing.
So I want to figure out next how to turn this into an NFT.
I was going to ask, how are you going to turn your knives into an NFT?
That's the goal right now. That's what I'm trying to figure out.
Really?
So I'm talking to some animators about animating the images that I've taken.
Yeah.
So I took some really cool pictures of this with like dry or liquid nitrogen, like smoke all around it. And I want to animate the pattern so it's moving all trippy.
Yeah.
And then the smoke is moving around it.
Yeah.
And then tie that into the Ethereum chain so that then the lineage of the piece is traced.
Yeah.
In the docket. And then every time it gets sold again with a smart contract, I'll get a piece of commission back from that.
Yeah, you can put a royalty on it.
Yeah.
On NFTs.
Yep.
Yeah, that was honestly one of my earliest questions when we started talking was, how do you turn this into crypto?
Yeah. That's
Because that's a place you got to think right now.
Yeah, exactly.
In 2021.
Yeah, I mean, I made some big mistakes with crypto already.
Really?
By, I could be much better off now that I am.
Yeah, you sold your Bitcoin a little too soon.
Yeah, or didn't take it when I could have.
Yeah.
There was some knives I passed. The guy offered me crypto on some years ago, and I passed on.
Yeah, I've got a buddy who, and I hope I'm not telling tales out of school, but he was visiting Knoxville, and he's from all over, but he was visiting from the Middle East at the time is where he was working, and he came to I did a First Friday art show in the underground in Knoxville. I did a bunch of my prints that I'd taken. I printed them on wood, and just did a show. And he came down and he was like, "Man, I think I figured out how to buy Bitcoin." And I was like, "Oh, sweet, do it." And he was like, "I'm gonna do it." And he bought $1,000 worth of Bitcoin while we were setting up for my First Friday show.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to. I reached out to him about a month ago, and I was like, "You still got that Bitcoin?"
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, "Not all of it." He was like, "I sold about half of it in 2018 for $75,000, and I've got the rest of it riding right now."
That's all right.
It's not bad.
Yeah, one of my buddies used to have a food truck, and he sold sandwiches and took Bitcoin for sandwiches. And he was like, "Oh yeah, I used to get 2 to 3 coins per sandwich."
Really? Yeah. Now he owns the New York Knicks.
No, he doesn't have anything now.
Really?
I mean, he sold it when things started jumping. So
yeah. Every time I see my financial advisor now, he always brings up the Bitcoin thing, and he's like, "You were the first person to ever talk to me about Bitcoin," and I'm glad you did, because it was worth looking at, and I definitely own some now.
Yeah.
That's interesting. When you want to do the animation and all that on that, I want to show you some stuff that we've done. Not to do it for you, but just to show you kind of some ideas of some stuff that we've done in the past that could, make that, maybe give you some ideas.
Yeah, for sure. I'm always looking. I mean, I definitely have some ideas about how all this stuff gets made, in my pattern development, I like to open my third eye and visualize these things. So I want to try to figure out how to make that more real.
Yeah, and put it into a digital space.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's really hard also as a maker who makes something and it's like a one-of-a-kind thing. And, it can exist on Instagram or whatever, but, I want to be able for it to serve me more than just as that object on its own.
Yeah, it makes good sense because it's a tangible thing that's going to go into someone's home and be appreciated,
Yeah, but it's a very private object,
Yeah.
So it's going to go in someone's home and, like, I make the stuff, I send it off, I never see it again. If I'm lucky, I might, like, get it back for resharpening or something.
Yeah.
But,
people do that too.
that's
People
it.
send them back and say, hey.
Every once in a while. But not very often.
Yeah.
I offer it to everybody,
Really?
but not
Just a
many
little
people take
service.
it.
That's
Yeah.
next level,
Yeah.
way to keep taking care of people.
Yeah.
Because they don't buy this to use it for 2 years and go buy another knife afterwards.
Exactly.
I promise you that.
Yeah, no, I mean, people buy these telling me they're planning on passing it down to their
Yeah.
kids,
Is it rude to ask what your knives sell for?
No, I mean, typically $1,000 to $2,000 is kind of like the average.
Okay.
But then also, pieces go for $6,000, $7,000, $8,000.
Okay. And are these things that people use, you think? Or are they?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, a lot of them do. I mean, there's definitely pieces that people buy from me and they're like, oh yeah, this is going to look great on my mantle in my house in Florida.
Does that bother you? Or
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
So you would rather it be functional and a piece of art?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's cool that they sit on a shelf, but I would rather it be something that, gets used.
Yeah.
Definitely. And I think that's the cool thing about the chef's knives, especially that, they're made to be this tool that you interact with on a regular basis. And, it's a tool for creativity. So, I hope that I make these pieces and then they inspire people to, spread their love in their own ways through, creating food, which is like fellowship and health and, all these really important things. So, it's a tool for other artists in my vision.
Is there anywhere anybody can get one right now?
Right now, Blackberry Farms is the only place where you can
Go buy one?
buy one right now.
Okay.
And,
What do they have?
They have a set that I designed for them that's a set of 4 knives, and you can buy them all individually. And there's like a paring knife, a little mini cleaver, santoku, which is Japanese for 3 waves. So it's a knife that can be used for anything.
Okay.
And then a big chef's knife.
And you can buy the whole thing, or you can buy them one by.
Yeah.
You can a la carte.
Yep.
The thing.
Yeah. And it's a special pattern that I developed for them. So they
Really?
all have so it all has like their signature pattern that I developed, and then walnut handles. So
Awesome.
it's a very classy,
Yeah.
very Blackberry Farm.
I was going to
piece.
say, is it in their brand in
Yeah.
their
Yeah.
vein? They're one of those places everybody knows about them, but we don't realize. I don't know. I feel like a lot of times with that place, we don't realize what we've got a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think it gets a bit of this reputation from the locals as being untouchable or too 5-star to go to, which I get. Not everybody can go there and spend time there, but I think that they're important.
Yeah.
Because of what they're doing, the same thing that they're doing with you.
Yeah.
They're really they're highlighting artisans with things like that. Their services, their experiences that they do there as well are top notch. If you go and stay there, you can go on a fly fishing trip. You can go on all these different kind of top class experiences. They're making great beer.
Yeah.
Too.
Yeah.
And their beer is not doing their name poorly.
Yeah. Yeah. They've got great beer, great food. John Corkendall, they've got a master gardener that has this amazing seed bank, and he's growing all these heirloom fruits and vegetables that are very important part of the history of our local history.
Right, because that stuff goes away without a guy like that.
Exactly.
Right?
Yep.
And they're also using a lot of what they grow there.
Yep.
On the menu every single night.
Yeah, and then also they're doing their own charcuterie stuff, their own cheeses. So yeah, they're doing a lot to preserve the history and craft of everybody in the region.
Yeah.
So it's really cool that they're able to support that.
I'm glad that they do, because I think it would be easy for people to, not like them if they didn't lean into being East Tennessee.
Yeah.
Because
totally.
they're one of a kind around here.
Yeah.
But if they didn't lean into working with artisans like you, and with, using what the land has to offer them, I think they'd be easy to hate.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't think people should.
Yeah. No, I'm very grateful, but I've never stayed there. I've never eaten there, but I've had the full tour.
Yeah. What else? We got a couple more knives we haven't talked about yet. We've talked about the serrated one. What's the second one with kind of the dull cork-looking handle?
So this one is called a K-tip. That's a Kirisuke. And
more Japanese stuff.
Yeah, this is another Japanese style. So basically, it's kind of like the race car of
it looks
Japanese
fast.
Knives.
It looks like it'll cut you both ways.
Yeah, exactly. So it has more of a flat edge on it. And this one has a really dense pattern. This is all carbon steel in this one.
Okay, so one like monolithic knife there.
This one has 3 different types of steel.
Oh, it does.
But you can see it has a really dense pattern in it.
Ah, yeah.
So that's it has more layers built up.
Okay, so that's what the denser pattern means?
Yeah, so basically I'll start off with a piece like this.
Yeah, billet.
A billet.
Yeah.
And then you can see all the layers.
Yeah, that's probably got a dozen layers in it.
Yeah, something like that.
Okay, and that's all just flat steel that you have.
It's just flat steel that I've
forged
just forged.
together?
Yep.
Okay.
So I get that up to about 2,000 degrees.
How long does that take to get to that?
Probably 30 hours.
Wow.
And then I keep on reducing that.
And just
adding
to let
those.
people know, that's about the size of a box of Cracker Jacks.
Yeah. Yeah.
And how much does it weigh? A couple
It's
pounds?
probably 5 pounds.
5 pounds?
Yeah.
Okay. Takes you 30 hours to forge it together.
Yeah. And there's a lot of cleaning involved and a lot of grinding and
Yeah.
a lot of other stuff to get there. It's not just all
Hammering the whole time.
Yeah. And then I'll cut that in half or in 3, and then I'll weld them together and then repeat the process. So every time I do that, I'll increase the amount of layers.
Okay, so say that again. You cut it in half lengthwise.
I'll cut it in half, lengthwise. I'll take this,
Okay.
cut that in 2,
Oh, okay.
then double those up.
And then hammer
then-
again.
and then
Oh,
squish
so
it
you
again.
get all that down.
Yeah, so we keep on
Oh,
reducing
shit.
it down. And you keep on reducing it and keep on reducing it until you build up the layer count that you want.
So those are all your layers right there.
Yep.
How many layers are in there? 2 dozen?
Yeah, that's probably 2 dozen. So that's basically that times 2.
So that's when you say dense, that's 2 dozen layers. That's why you get the tighter pattern, like on that Japanese
Yeah,
blade.
so this one has probably 200 layers.
Really?
So, I've done repeated this process like 10 times. Wow. In order to get,
how
to
many
get to that.
how many knives can you make out of that?
This block is probably 1 knife.
Okay.
And this is probably like 3 knives.
Okay.
So I lose about 50% of the mass every time I repeat the process.
Because it's condensing, right?
Well, because it's condensing, but also because of heating it up and oxidizing. So as it heats up, you lose a large percentage of the metal just to oxygen. It basically turns to forge scale.
Because it gets too hot.
It gets hot, yep, and it just forms like a scab around the entire piece of metal, like this piece here, where it has all this stuff.
Yeah. That goes away. That's the cleaning part you're talking about. Okay.
Yeah, so all that's got to be ground
Is that
out.
impurity?
No, that's carbon mostly.
Okay.
So mostly that's just the metal reacting with oxygen and then forming these oxides, and it's like a carbon oxide.
Yeah. So that billet right there has 2 pieces of rebar coming out of it. Is that just like a handle that you put in there?
Yeah, so I got to be able to grab onto it somehow.
Yeah.
And
beat it.
beat it. Yeah, so I'll just use kind of a sacrificial steel.
Yeah.
To help me manipulate it.
Gotcha.
So I can have something with the tongs to grab onto.
Yeah.
Because I'm using basically just big pliers to hold on to the stuff.
I've noticed a lot of glass blowers also do metal work, right?
Yeah.
Why is that?
It's just the same ingredients,
Okay.
You've got heat,
Glass or sand.
Yeah. But both also you have to learn how to make your own tools as an artist a lot of times. The deeper you get into your craft, the more you realize that you can't just go to the store and buy the thing you need.
Well, yeah, you said that like your 3 most important tools in the shop, the hydraulic press, the not the mechanical hammer, the power hammer, and then the other one was
The forge or the grinder.
yeah, you made them all.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you can't buy them at Harbor Freight.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, even my forge has gotten crazy. Like I've got an AI controller for it now.
What?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's got, I've built the entire thing from scratch, but now I added a computer to it. So I can set a target temperature. So certain metals can't go over a certain temperature, or certain metals need to stay within a certain range.
So you put a thermostat in there?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
A thermostat with a relay, basically, that is able to tell the temperature that it's getting to, and then cut off the fuel source when it gets that target temperature. And it's self-learning. So it comes up to say I've got it set to 2,000 degrees. It learns how fast, every time I turn it on, how fast it gets up to that 2,000 degrees and how long it can turn off and then turn back on in order to maintain that temperature.
So your machinery is also, or your tools are also getting better.
Yeah. Yeah.
As you go, because you've AI'd them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that helping your efficiency?
Oh yeah, it's huge. I mean, it reduces the amount of space that I have to mess up.
Right.
The smarter the tools are, the dumber I can be. The more I can focus on what's really important.
Right.
That's the art.
Yeah, I was going to say your attention can, which is probably maybe the most important commodity of this whole thing.
Yeah.
Can be allocated.
Yeah,
in other
exactly.
places, the smarter your tools are.
Exactly. Because, I mean, every single tool in my shop can kill you. Like,
yeah.
Easy.
Oh, dude.
So,
I'm like, how do you have hands?
Yeah, I mean, my hands are in great shape right now. I
But
don't
they're
have any
fantastic.
cuts.
Like, I see fingerprints on there.
Yeah, that's rare.
How do you... You must be either really good or not very good. I don't know.
I've gotten a lot better. I mean, like a year or two ago, my hands would have been all sliced up and
really
blistered and bloody. But I've just gotten, just more aware of my actions, more careful. The better I get, the more I just know how to dance around things.
Well, it almost reminds me of like Alex Honnold, or like a free solo climber, something like that. Somebody who just like, you can't fuck up.
Yeah,
like that.
There's no room.
That's not an option.
Yeah, exactly.
You just die if you mess up.
Yeah,
and that's kind of you're in that high stakes world a little bit.
Yeah, and that's what's kept me in it also.
Yeah,
like having to focus like that is really what has kept me from giving up. Like every day going in there and like it's like a life or death situation,
Yeah.
And when you have that pressure behind you, it really makes you focus and appreciate that focus. And then, I'm able to carry that through everything in my life.
Yeah.
So it's really like made me a better person in so many ways.
Yeah, I almost miss that about the film world of working with film and working with this thing that you can't see. You don't get an LCD viewfinder right here. And I know that your life is not at stake when you're doing it, but you might have $100,000 shoot day going on.
Yeah.
And it's all about whether or not you do your job right.
Yeah.
And it's apples to oranges to say that that's the same kind of attention, but I like that idea of like the stakes are super high. Mm-hmm. You have to know your craft so much that if you fuck it up, there are huge consequences.
Yeah.
And there's something about it that just that you're not doing meaningless work at that point.
Yeah.
You know that what you're doing is important.
Yeah, right. And going back to photography, one of the first things I studied at UT was photography under Baldwin Lee. And I don't know if you know about him, but he studied with Minor White at MIT. And then who was the guy that toured around the South and took photos? Shoot, I'm drawing a blank.
I know Ansel Adams. That was in the West, though.
Yeah, no, it wasn't Ansel Adams. Oh, man, totally drawing a blank. But anyway, Baldwin was an amazing photographer, amazing teacher. And he was all about teaching that decisive moment, from Henry Cartier-Bresson, who was like one of the old school greats in photography. And, being able to really like know your craft so well that you're able to pick that exact moment when shit needs to happen. And the importance of always being ready for that decisive moment. And so, just because I do this, make knives, it's really not about the knives. It's about everything else for me.
The tactile part of it, the executing the artistry, all that?
Yeah. Yeah.
And knowing when to pull the trigger?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. and knowing when and how and what you're looking for, and knowing why you're doing it.
Right. That's a really big one. For me, when I look, and I'm bouncing this all off the film craft,
Yeah.
thinking of it all in those terms. Knowing the why
Yeah.
is the most important part.
Yeah.
I feel like if you, at least with that craft, understanding its most carnal base, 24 frames per second, how exposure works.
Mm-hmm.
That's really all you got to know.
Yeah.
And then it's how you execute it. From there. But you can step way deeper into the process and learn how to expose something on a video camera or whatever. But you're not understanding these just base carnal these needs and these axioms that have to be true in order for a craft to work. And again, apples to oranges a little bit, but it does resonate with me to hear you talk about just even knowing your metals, knowing just the deepest part of that stuff.
Yeah.
And then that's when you can start to have fun.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, you have to know exactly what color the metal's got to be at when you work it.
Yeah.
And then what color when it stops.
Or straw. Is straw a color that you get?
Yeah. Straw is kind of a color. Straw is a color when you're doing tempering.
Okay.
So you have the forging temperatures, which occur between say 1,000 to 2,000 degrees.
Yeah.
And then you have your temper colors, which happen between 300 and 900 degrees.
What are you doing in the tempering phase?
Tempering is where you actually soften the metal. So first
Is this when it's on its way down from being...
So basically you bring it up to that bright orange color and you quench it. And when you quench it, you put a lot of stress on the metal.
And that hardens it?
You harden it, yeah. And you're freezing all the molecules into this very unnatural position for them.
They don't want to be there.
They don't want to be there.
Yeah.
And it's basically like glass. You can take a blade and hit it on a table or drop it, and which I've done, and it'll just shatter. And so then you got to temper it. So that's where you kind of relieve the stress from the metal.
Gotcha.
And so you relieve the stress at temperatures between 300 and 900 degrees.
You let it wiggle into where it wants to be, get comfortable.
Yeah.
Okay.
And even that's a very precise process.
Yeah.
Of kind of heating it up. So I mostly temper my stuff between 300 and 400 degrees.
Okay.
But if I was making an axe, something like that, I want to temper that at 600 or 800 degrees because I know that it's going to receive more impact.
Yeah.
But by doing that,
you don't want to make it too soft.
Exactly. So you're softening it, and as you soften it, then you're kind of reducing the edge holding abilities.
Feel you.
So there's this fine line where you got to figure out how hard does it need to be in order to accomplish the tasks that it's going to accomplish. But, how soft do we need to make it in order to so it can be durable?
Yeah. So with as involved as this stuff is, and as each one of these knives takes a week, 2 weeks to make, is there any way to turn this into a production model without losing the magic of it?
Yeah. I think there definitely is. I think for me, it's going to be just a matter of larger machinery. Basically just scaling the size of everything up. Right now I have a 42-ton press. But what if I had a 150-ton press?
Does that mean you can smash that faster?
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly. And, what if I had a crane to be able to move it so I don't have to pick up this whole thing, because this might be 40, 60 pounds when I'm working with it.
Yeah.
But what if I had a way to hold it up while I'm working with it?
I feel you.
Bigger power hammer right now. I have a 25-pound hammer, but what if I had a 250-pound hammer?
Yeah. Well, there's really, I guess you could call it economies of scale, but really it's just kind of, it's just kind of one-to-one. If steel doesn't have any economy of scale.
Yeah. No, it really doesn't.
Yeah.
But, I think through just increasing the scale and then teaching people how to execute these processes in the way, by having things like a forge that's not going to overheat the steel. So, it always is up to that target temperature. Yeah. Kind of removing a lot of that guesswork and increasing the scale of it.
Yeah. anything else that is outside of the knife world that you're thinking about working on or getting into? Because I mean, it seems like you've got, I don't want to say you've got this one whipped, but I mean, it looks pretty damn good to me.
Yeah, so the past couple of years I've been developing a cookware line.
Really?
So it's basically, I've been reimagining how, the whole cooking process. And I use all cast iron, like old cast iron, everything from like old Lodge to old stuff from my grandparents. And, there's things about it though that I don't love. So I don't love how heavy it is, but I do love how heavy it is.
Yeah.
I love the natural nonstick, cooking surfaces.
Sure.
So I'm trying to figure out, I've developed new ways to kind of take all the things that I love about my cast iron, but then also applying a lot of the metallurgy and things that I've learned about the knife making. And I'm developing a new type of carbon steel cookware that basically will have all the things I love about cast iron, but also in a carbon steel. So I'll be launching a new brand probably in the next year.
Really?
Yeah. And
dude, that sounds like the best of both worlds. It sounds too good to be true almost. But I almost wonder, it seems like, Lodge has been around for how long? 150 years, something like that.
Yeah.
South Pittsburgh, Tennessee, right? And they hadn't changed a lot.
Yeah.
You look at their 150-year-old stuff, they pride themselves on that, right? But think about the innovation that the rest of the world's gone through.
Yeah, exactly.
In that time, there has to be a better way. There has to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it sounds like you're in search of, you're on a conquest to find it.
Yeah. So I'm actually working with UT, and I've got 3 teams of students that I'm working with in their industrial design, industrial engineering, and business departments. And they're all helping me kind of studying my current processes. They're studying my knife making process, and they're studying my new cookware stuff. And we're trying to figure out how to make these things happen. How are we going to increase the scale of the production of the knife business? And then also how are we going to introduce the cookware? And so, we're having to like figure out how to make all the dies and how are all these industrial processes all going to come into play, and how many people is it going to take? How much is it going to cost? All the different aspects of it. So hopefully they've been working with me since last August. And so at the end of this year, I'll have a full, basically business plan for this. And then I got to find a lot of money.
I don't think it's going to be hard.
We'll see. Yeah, I hope not. But, when you start looking at how much things cost to do them on industrial scales, it's pretty astronomical.
Is it going to be something that has to start on an industrial scale, or can it be like your knives where you start them in a shop in your backyard? I guess the idea of this is to be production, right?
Yeah, it'll still be production, but it'll still be small production. So, we'll start off like doing small batches. So, we're looking at producing 1,000 pans the first run.
Okay.
That's a lot, but it's also not a lot.
Yeah. It's a lot for a guy in his garage. It's not a lot for a factory.
Exactly. Yeah. So, I'm going to be looking for a new shop space, which I love working in my backyard, but also like it's getting pretty packed.
Yeah. Is there any fear that this gets too big, or that it stops becoming a craft and starts to become the business, or too jobby?
Yes and no. I'm kind of ready for the next step.
Yeah.
Where, I don't want to have to be putting in 18-hour days.
Yeah.
Working all by myself. I don't, carrying all the weight.
Yeah.
Gets to be a lot after a while.
I bet.
And then also, like, I hate saying no to people.
I feel you.
Like, I'm just always saying, no, you can't come work with me in my shop. No, you can't buy anything from me.
Yeah.
And I want to start saying yes to things. I want to say, yes, you can come work with me. Yes, you can come visit my shop. Yes, you can buy stuff. This is how you buy it. And so, that's basically what I've got to do in order to get to the next phase, the next level.
Just to get the production up.
Yeah. And, and that's going to start opening things up to me in a lot of ways where, I'll start to be able to think more big picture stuff. I'll get to work more on like the design aspect, which is really a fun thing.
Yeah, I was going to say, that seems
you're
like
dreaming of the things.
Yeah, that's when it can start to be a lot of fun too, right?
Exactly.
Because that's where your cycles go.
Yeah.
Into the creative and not into hammering.
Yeah,
as much.
Exactly.
Yeah, that feels like it could really explode this even more.
Yeah, I think so.
Again, I don't know how you make this any better, but I mean, I'm not going to underestimate what's in your brain.
Yeah, I mean, I want to push it as far as I can, really, and I would love to be able to step away from it at one point, you know, and
let it be its own thing.
Yeah, totally. And I can go back. I can go back to this, you know, just go back to where I started.
Exactly.
I mean, I have no problem with that, and that kind of excites me, actually, to be able to take it full circle, and to have this thing that lives on beyond me, and just like the pieces do, you know, like these things are they're gonna outlive all of us. Yeah. So why not like build the machine that's also going to outlive us, and, you know, give my son a legacy, and, like, you know, give our town something. So I think there's a lot of potential in it all.
I'd say you're right.
And
I'm damn. I feel honored to sit here just in front of you and in front of your work, man. I'm pumped about what you're doing, and I'm also I'm very glad to hear your, you know, the reasons that you're doing it are not just to, you know, to make money or to, you know, make this narcissistic art either. I mean, it's something that is, it's storied, and you know very well that this stuff is going to last, you know, longer than all of us. And you're working in a, you know, in a craft and in a medium that doesn't mean nothing. Yeah. It's not a throwaway. Yeah. It's not disposable.
No, exactly. And, you know, I think that's so much of what our culture promotes. It's like, just make it fast, make it cheap, like, get it done.
Yeah, let's get the China out of this process here and really, you know, make something that means something, not just some disposable throwaway stuff.
Exactly. And, you know, that's something else that's really important to me, too, is that, you know, we've lost so much American manufacturing, and, like, these skills are just, like, gone. And through expanding my business and expanding the scale, you know, I'll be able to, like, kind of return some of these skills back to, you know, the people here that kind of, you know, made America great the first time.
Yeah. Before we try it again, you're right, though, and this is missing. This is the part that what I'm looking at right here is the part that is missing from our society and from our culture. But this has a way of, it's not braggadocious. It's not hoity-toity. It's not it's not it's real. It's real stuff that looks that looks like craftsmanship, and it doesn't look like it's here just for now. And it you can tell by looking at it that it is something that someone spent a lot of hard work on, and that they meant for it to be here. Not that they meant for it to be, you know, a commodity that's bandied about, but something that is really intentional and not self-serving. And I think that is one of the most absent parts of craftsmanship now. Yeah. And not to say that people don't get into it for the right reasons, but it's really easy to sell one of these knives for $1,000, I'm sure, and say, okay, how can I make that thing cheaper? Yeah. Or how can I make it faster? Yeah. And get one out the door a lot quicker. But none of this screams that, you know, to me. Yeah. And I commend you so much for, I'm sure, resisting the urge, you know, at some point to just start, you know, I don't want to say printing money, but to, you know, bastardize your craft and just to, you know, to make a buck or move forward. And I'm so, it is so relieving to me to see this level of artistry sitting on the table. Thanks, man. In front of me. And I'm legit honored to be around your knives and around you. Thanks. Are we going to do this again sometime?
Yeah, I would love to. I've got lots more to talk about.
Really?
Like I said, the next level that's coming, it's going to be some real cool stuff.
The cookware stuff?
Yeah.
Do you want to get together and 6-8 months, a
Yeah,
year, and
yeah,
do
that'd
this
be great.
again?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll have to have you over at my shop and check out
I'd
everything.
geek out,
It'll
man.
everything will make a lot more sense, you know,
Really?
once you see like, oh yeah, that you did make that yourself. Yeah.
That is AI
Yeah.
over there. Yeah.
But I mean, my stuff it's scrappy, you know. It's definitely like I've put together things in some very creative ways.
I bet it all holds up. I bet I mean, if it helps you make this stuff, it has to be done right.
Yeah, yeah. But you know, I'm always making improvements to everything because you know, again, you can't just go to the store and buy the machines that I need, so they break down more often than I would like to admit.
They get a Band-Aid here and there.
Yeah, lots of Band-Aids and lots of work constantly trying to figure out, all right, well, it's doing that thing again. How do we stop that?
Let's catch up soon.
Yeah, man. Let's do it.
I'm excited to see where
Cool,
all
man.
this continues to
Yeah,
go.
like I said, it's just getting started.
Love it.
Cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
South of Scruffy.